So, here we are, our first edition of the GI Cure question and answer, and I hope you have a lot of questions for me because I know I have a lot of answers. So go ahead and hit me with some good questions. I'm with my buddy here today, Italo. He's my producer, and he's helped me get off on my the best foot for my first broadcast. So let's have some questions, if they were listening. We didn't really officially announce when we're going to be on, so there might not be anybody out there. Well, Talo, why don't you ask me a question?
Yeah, actually, I've got many questions because I've had 18 years of Crohn's, and it's been a pain. One of the biggest things that bothers me a lot every day is the pain itself. How can I live a pain-free life or lower my pain?
Well, I get that question a lot. People have acute pain, pain that came on, like a real strong stomach ache, or just pain they might reach for a painkiller. Natural stuff does not have an answer for that directly, meaning that when you have inflammatory bowel conditions, not disease, notice I always say condition, those are unnatural. They're not natural. They're man-made by the release of heavy-duty artificial antibiotics. So what that brings about is unusually, unnaturally high levels of inflammation. And the natural stuff was invented by nature, who knows how many years ago, billions of years ago, who knows, wasn't designed at that time. The person or thing that created them didn't anticipate those antibiotics. So now you have really high levels of inflammation, and this is where I break from most, or probably all naturopaths, is that we know that right now those natural things, people use turmeric and some of those different herbs, those are anti-inflammatories, but they're not strong enough. Again, nature didn't anticipate these high levels, like a tsunami of inflammation. So what happens is that we need help. We need help, and what do we use? If need be, and temporarily, we use a steroid or some medication temporarily. We keep them on our team. We love having someone that can write a prescription for something we need. And we should have an open mind and know that we don't want to tough it out. If you're in extreme pain, you take something, and that's going to bring the inflammation down. Now, here's the best part of the answer to your question. How do we actually fix the pain? Well, those natural things will now work better. They'll work better because they're not dealing with that tsunami, and they'll go in there and do their work because it's basically quiet. And they work better than if we didn't use the steroid, and they do their work. And then what happens is, because they don't have any interference, when they do their work, we take away the steroid, and you're either, I wouldn't say you're necessarily healed, but you either have no pain, but more likely less pain. And then from there, we can manage it without any drug. So the answer is always, hey, the natural stuff doesn't have the same type of pain-killing properties as drug, but it does heal it. And then after we're done with that part I just described, the natural stuff can then finish the job. So it's always about healing the basic thing with my basic GI Cure protocol, but how do we get to that point? Sometimes using a drug. So we shouldn't feel as though there's a step backwards or a failure if we had to take a drug. It's actually a victory. I always say, hallelujah, bring it on. We're so grateful there is such a thing as prednisone. When we need it, it's on our team. So I understand you had some problems yourself at one point, and I don't know if you had used any medication, but the problem, I'll finish this answer, is people go on the medication, and if they don't do what we do, backfill with the natural stuff, when they go off the medication, they're going to be right where they were before because they didn't do any work. So if someone gets out of the hospital, they're on the medications wear off. Like if you take a steroid, you wear off after about 10 days. You say, well, this is great before the 10 days. This is great. Then after 10 day, 11th day, 12th day, pain's back. Pain's back because in the hospital, they didn't do anything behind the scenes, which is what we do. So people should know that we use those things when we need them, and then we discard them when we don't. And there's no problem if we need them again temporarily. They're on our team, and we use them properly, which is backfill. And same thing with an antibiotic. We use those when we need them.
Fantastic. That definitely helps a lot. We've got Tammy, Daniel, and Madman for welcome. You're more than welcome to ask questions in the chat box. In the meantime, if you're okay with this, doctor, I have another question for you. Regarding inflammation. If we're talking about antibiotics, is that what's triggering the inflammation? Or is it foods that's triggering the inflammation? Or what do you believe is the main source?
Yeah, I like that question because people are always calling me saying, well, I'm on this diet, tried that diet, and even diets called anti-inflammatory diets. All food can do is not cause a problem. It can exist. It can aggravate a pre-existing problem. Now, another insight into that, people say dairy and gluten, those are the two main things. They cause the inflammation, but they don't understand what they're saying. The mucosal lining in the gut is like software in a computer, and it recognizes the data that you download in terms of celery and peppers and ice cream, whatever it is. And when our software is strong, it can process anything. Like a movie versus a type in an email, a movie would be eating dairy because it's more complex. So if your software is dented, if it's not updated, if it's been compromised by the ultimate biocomputer virus, is antibiotic. Antibiotic comes in and it wipes out the bacteria, and then we're not able to recognize, which is the software, we're not able to recognize the more complex foods, which are innocent. And then what happens when they're swallowed, they're in our body. And the body says, well, we don't know who the heck you are. We don't have anybody identifying the molecular structure. And it tries to kill it because it doesn't know what it is with acid. And that acid then will burn any tissue that's not covered. Let's go back a step or two. Remember I said if we lost some of our software, mucosal lining, then it leaves the hardware, which is the wall of the intestines or the stomach, exposed to the acid. And the excess acid, when we don't recognize the food, and then it creates a cascade of anything like mucus. Mucus is something that people say, well, I eat ice cream, I get mucus. Well, that's an insulation. It creates mucus to insulate against that acid. Same thing as when you have a runny nose, you have allergies. The mucus is there to block the histamines that are trying to kill the thing you breathed in. The sinus, the lungs, and bladder, and gastrointestinal tract, they're all stomachs that apply to, the rules apply to all of them. Is if I could say, you have IBS of the sinus, or you have allergies of the bowel, they're interchangeable. So to answer your question, what we do is we always go back and realize that food's not causing it, and if food is a problem, it's only because our biocomputer is not updated, and that's how we heal you. We update that, and then we say, let's have some ice cream. And people are shocked when they can have it. The exception to that is if someone tells me they had a problem from day one, I'll give in and say, okay, you really are celiac. There aren't many of you out there, but they think they are. But if I say to you, were you celiac 10 years ago? Did you have problems with wheat 10 years ago? And I say, well, no, it came about 2 years ago. I'll say, then you're not really celiac, and we put the mucosal lining software back in, you'll be able to eat wheat. So people read books about how gluten causes arthritis. Well, it's not causing arthritis. It's what I just said. It requires more acid to digest, and plus it doesn't recognize it, so there's more acid, and that goes out and inflames other tissue. So the idea is, it's confusing. Yeah, let's until we have our software set up, let's not eat the gluten. But when we do, and everybody tells me, well, I'm gluten free, I'll be that for life. Whenever they do say that, I say, no, you can choose not to eat that. But when we put Humpty Dumpty back together again, you'll be able to eat anything because your software will recognize all the data.
Wow, that's an incredible answer. I so much appreciate that, because understanding it from a technical point of view, so it's basically all about reprogramming. And if we're reprogramming, I mean, we have a user here, it's Tammy. She's saying, she was so heartbroken when she had to get on the meds. I feel the same way because I just did Remicade. My first infusion. In fact, 3 years ago, I did Remicade for the first time. It hit my stomach. It was bad. I had to let it go. I tried it again last week. And it took me to the hospital. I was in the hospital for 4 days this week, and I'm miserable because my energy is so low again. I get fatigued often. I eat something, my anemia is back in. So another question I would ask you is, how can we, as you're taking meds, and you're going through your protocol, what would you recommend in the best way to do this, so that your body starts to heal and it produces the right amount of acids so that it doesn't eat up the lining?
Yeah, that's another thing is people tell me they have too much acid, and I tell them, no, you have too little mucosal lining. That mucosal lining doubles. It's amazing stuff. It doubles as the firewall that blocks the acid from hitting the tissue, but it also is the computer, the software, I should say, that recognizes the particles. If you don't have enough software, you're not going to be able to recognize the even the molecules of, say, a probiotic. So, and I lost part of your question. I forgot the answer. I forgot what you asked.
Yeah. So you brought it up really well, because I really wanted to get more into the probiotic stuff. So understanding how to balance the acidity.
Oh, the acidity. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We don't produce too much acid. The only time we produce excessive acid is what I alluded to in my last answer, was when it doesn't recognize the thing that's inside of it, the food, and it says you may be an enemy, and it creates a lot more acid, and that can be chronic every day. Conditions like fibromyalgia, that's what that is. Fibromyalgia is a condition where you're always sore everywhere, and it's because you're just saturated with acid because you don't have a mucosal lining. And mucosal lining, when we install it properly with colostrum, it goes into every cell in the body. That's what I basically invented this whole process. I had to start from scratch and said, well, I'm going to try to figure out how to do this. And then, a lot of stuff kept coming to me, and then I would find guinea pigs, basically. I put up a sign and say, hey, if you have fibromyalgia, come in, talk to me. And what happens is every cell in the body, picture a circle, is basically like your stomach. It requires the mucosal lining in there, and the way to control chronic pain is when we take a probiotic and colostrum. You always take colostrum. We'll explain that another time with the probiotic, and then it goes out to the bloodstream. Besides fixing the gut, it goes out to the bloodstream, and every circle gets a dose of this sacred stuff that goes in and does the same thing as the stomach. It covers the mucosal lining. Why do we want that inside of a cell? Because a cell digests stuff just like your stomach, and when it does, it releases acid. You need that insulation inside the cell to buffer against the acid the cell is releasing, and you put that in the whole body. You put that in the stomach, it goes out the whole body. I mean, I got a patient whose father was a dentist. Father was feeding him with negative information. This guy was a world-class pianist for Cleveland Orchestra, whatever they call themselves, and his hands were frozen. And I was treating him for Crohn's. And I said to him, don't be surprised if your hands loosen up some. So he said, come back. And he was, I guess he was really respectful of his father, and he kept saying, my father says it won't happen, no way. Well, I treated the guy, Crohn's got better. I bumped into the guy 3 or 4 years ago, and the guy shook my hand, and he squeezed the heck out of my hand, and he told me that his hands were perfect. Why? Because the cells in his hand got their dose of probiotic from fixing his gut. So the answer is that the system I developed is all-inclusive for so many things. I mean, there's certain things I wouldn't claim that it heals, but a large number of things that are we would never see a connection with. A guy this morning told me his shoulder hurt and asked me if it would help. I said, well, I don't treat shoulders, but I fix the GI and then we watch the shoulder. So it's a pain management system in the sense that chronic pain is you had balancing acid, you had said. It balances, it puts the mucosal lining to insulate against the acid, and also there are certain things in the stomach, I forget the name of it at the moment, parietal cells. They regulate, release acid, and they take their signal from the probiotic. Little bacteria in there directing traffic. They tell the parietal cells, oh, she just drank 8 ounces of kefir. And so it tells it we need this type of acid in this amount. So it does regulate the acids in the gut, but the main deal is the insulation.
So after all of this is done, and regulated, will the problem come back? Have you
Ah.
seen people with those same problems?
Yes, under special circumstances. The problem will come back under the circumstances how you got it in the first place. Is that you take the probiotic, take the colostrum, we repair the tissue, and all that, cover up the nerves, and Humpty Dumpty put it back together again. You go about your business. How could we ever get this back? Can it just creep in on us? No, you'd have to take very strong antibiotics or a series of antibiotics and not replace, because we're supposed to replace the probiotic afterwards. If you take a probiotic, you should have an antibiotic. You should take a probiotic and colostrum. So how can we get it back? Forget about Dr. Snow. Go about our business. Oh, we need an antibiotic, and I always say take them if we need them. But you figure about backfilling with the colostrum, the probiotic, and then it takes a while, like it did originally, for the acid that now has access to the tissue. It takes a while for it to eat through the skin, fat, and muscle layers, hit a nerve, and you'll say, "Oh, it's back again," like it's a disease that came back. No, you didn't remember the golden rule. If you take a antibiotic, you take a probiotic, and you take a probiotic, you take colostrum. It's the only circumstance that can come back. You can drink all the whiskey you want. I had some guy down in Texas, him and his buddies, they were always swallowing tobacco juice and they'd vomit. And he said, "Does that cause my IBS?" And I said, "No, that's not an antibiotic. It's not good for you." But yeah, that's the only way you can get it is through an antibiotic.
Wow, that's incredible. Very very relieving because here's the problem. At least personally for me, I have ulcers in my small bowel, and it's been super hard to get rid of them because of as you know, there's so many feet deep in there. And so my question would be, if I were to follow this protocol, will it also treat those ulcers? Are those ulcers part of the same antibiotic problems that I'm facing?
Yeah. The ulcers are where acid ate a hole because it didn't have the protective mucosal lining. And so it's all the same. You could have different types of inflammation or different types of damage in different parts of your 25-foot intestinal tract or your stomach and your esophagus. Uh, but it's all the same thing: acid eating, penetrating, eating flesh. And one point they might call an ulcer. Ulcerative colitis happens to be when they ate deep enough to hit a blood vessel. But it's all the same thing. It's all the same damage. Um, there's no different. If it's an ulcer, we can also call it we can call it an abrasion. I call it sometimes a cut, sometimes an injury. Anything that goes on in your gut that's not right in terms of inflammatory bowel, we could call it an ulcer. And all that means is it has to penetrate the skin. So when you have it in the small bowel, people get hung up, like SIBO is a condition to get hung up on. Oh, it's in the small bowel and all that. It doesn't matter. The body's going to take the material that we ingest to where it needs to go. If you break the big toe in your right foot, it's going to deliver the calcium to that spot, not the left foot. Now, how does anybody explain? There's no way of understanding how it does that. It's body wisdom. But small bowel, large bowel, left side, right side, there's a condition called left side colitis. And I say bullshit. I said, "Oh, that's supposed to be more difficult than the right side." You gotta be kidding me. It has nothing to do with. That's an excuse. A lot of gastroenterologists will choose something that they'll use as an excuse, and many times it's intentional, just to sort of get them off the hook. I'm not into bashing these guys because we need them when we need them for prescriptions and testing, but an ulcer is an ulcer is an ulcer. If it's your esophagus and that's another thing I wanted to say earlier, you don't have too much acid. Doctors, it's really the chemical and drug companies will say, "Oh, acid's not supposed to travel up and down the esophagus." Absolutely is. You don't have too much acid, you have too little mucosal lining, and if you have acid reflux and you feel pain, you have an ulcer in your esophagus.
That's it's mind blowing how you're breaking down these myths that I believed in different stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people in our audience believe in the same. So that leads to the next question, and then we're gonna answer another question from the audience. But what's the link between probiotics and colostrum? Why should they be drank together?
All right. That's something, again, I extrapolated on my own. I started getting a flood of people with inflammatory bowel conditions, and it came on like a plague. And all of a sudden, I closed my office. I said, I got to figure it out. I got to figure it out. I was hoping to find something to help humanity at some point, not ever figuring I would. I said, this might be it. So I went out in the woods, and I was actually watching a cow nurse his baby. And I said, "What they?" I said to the farmer eventually. I said, "What are they doing?" I mean, I realized the whole thing, but he said, "Oh, they're getting the colostrum." I go, "The colostrum?" He goes, "Yeah, the colostrum." So I said, "What? What do you mean?" "Yeah, the first day or so they produce this stuff." And I go, "Why do they want that?" He goes, "I don't know." So then I sat back and said, then I noticed, I said, well, women do that too. Every mammal does that. Imagine there's a raccoon somewhere doing that. It's no coincidence that the first second the baby's born, the second thing it should do after breathing is get on that breast. That colostrum doesn't show up next Wednesday. It's there right now, ready to go. What's the relationship? So the mother's nursing a baby, and here comes the colostrum the first 24 hours, the sticky stuff. It goes in the stomach and lines the whole GI tract, actually the lungs, sinus, these other places. And then the breast milk comes after 24 hours. It's loaded with probiotics. They stick to the colostrum. If you take a probiotic or a baby, say the baby is just removed from the mother because there's some medical condition for the first day, doesn't get to nurse, doesn't get that colostrum, that baby, when they bring it back and starts getting the breast milk, won't be able to process the breast milk, and it'll be colicky and likely have lactose intolerance the rest of his life. So the colostrum is there. What is its main purpose is? To be sticky stuff. Lining picture of someone drinks some milk. And just picture inside, it may leave a film, white film. Well, that's what colostrum is like. And it's there for now when the probiotic, which would be in the breast milk, but of course we have in capsules, it goes in and sticks to the colostrum. Without colostrum, it goes in the toilet. There's probably 1 billion people nowadays in the world taking probiotics, and it's all going down the toilet. The only people who it isn't going down the toilet are my patients. I've never heard of anybody anyone else even mention what I just told you. And if you don't do that, don't bother doing anything else. Just go have the surgery, because you're not going to get healed without that. Also, I don't mention it much. Colostrum has an ability to produce flesh. A lot of times people put on a couple pounds. I don't mention it too much, but people will put on a couple pounds because it helps develop muscle. Not a big deal like steroids, and what do we want that? Because part of the bowel tissue is muscle. So sticky stuff helps build the flesh faster, and that's the most primary thing for a human being, that it takes place the first minutes of life, and it's amazingly, our doctors don't even know what it is. When doctors do surgery, they'll scrape the mucosal lining right out of the way. Say, that's junk, get rid of it. Imagine that.
Wow. We've got some, incredible information that you're sharing. This is invaluable, and thank you for that. We've got 3 questions from the audience. I'll start with some of the ones that are here relevant. Why is supplemental iron so hard on the gut? Is there one that you recommend to increase ferritin without the GI side effects?
Yeah, good question. Iron is a large molecule. If you picture like a boulder versus a little, like almost like grains of sand, some of the other minerals, it's big. So if you have a compromised gut, so you're not going to recognize the data anyways, well, because you're compromised software. So you're not going to, even some of the smaller molecules, you're going to say, well, I'm not digesting that well. Here comes this big boulder, iron. And so the body says, we don't know what to deal with you. And oftentimes they'll make it constipated. But why is it rough on the stomach? Because it's not able to digest it. And what's it do? Bombs it with acid, like it does other things that interprets as a foreigner. And you don't absorb it. Here you are, compromised gut already, trying to swallow the biggest molecular thing, and it just isn't going to work. So what do we have to do? First of all, you don't really want to take iron in a tablet form. That's the least digestible. That's like biting into a piece of iron and trying to chew it. You want it in a liquid form. There's a really good product out there called Floradix, Flora-Dix. It's pretty much sold everywhere. Health food stores, Whole Foods has it, obviously. It's liquid iron. It's from plants, and it doesn't have that problem. When iron comes from a plant like that, it's I forget the plants that are in there, but there's a few roots. Might be might be one of them, but it doesn't have that problem. It's immediately absorbed, and then the iron levels go up without any hazards, any problems. So Floridix is what you want.
Incredible. Are natural probiotics, another question from the audience, are natural probiotics like kombucha, fermented vegetables, kefir, etc., better than probiotic supplements?
Another good one. I like that one because it gives me a chance to go a little deeper. Okay. Here's the problem we have. We're using synthetic antibiotics nowadays. That wipes out a whole spectrum of things. Now, the fermented foods, they only replace certain things. You might get 4 or 5 strains of bacteria at the most from kombucha, or they even like pickles. Pickles and things were originally fermented for that purpose. Here's what happened with our ancestors. It's pretty miraculous. They would get sick and they would take penicillin. And they didn't know it was penicillin. They were eating. My grandmother used to eat all the mold off the bread. She used to buy the bread mold. They would give it to her at the store because she knew, her mother taught her that it was actually penicillin. And the penicillin only killed a small spectrum of germs, the ones that our ancestors were exposed to. So it would kill off, say, 2 bacteria. And then you're missing, you say, oh, I'm missing 2 bacteria because I took the penicillin. And it just so happens that the foods they ate, like yogurt and those foods you mentioned, they had those strains of bacteria. So it's wonderful. So one thing took them out, and they plugged in their food that they ate and put it right back in. And they had no idea what they're doing, maybe. I guess they did intuitively anyways. So when you take a modern day antibiotic, the kefir and the kombucha doesn't have a chance. It's only going to put in a couple strains of bacteria, and you need a bunch of them. It's good food, and you should eat it, and it does supplement, but they're used more effectively for maintenance, just to keep your belly going good, because there are antibiotics in the environment. They just chip away a little bit, and that's when you use a kefir to put or one of those foods, kombucha, sauerkraut, to put some of the strains back in.
That's incredible. Another question from the audience, and these are amazing questions. Dr. Snow, I have a question based on my experience. This is someone who has really bad intestinal damage. How important is it to stay in communication with you, and how to be proactive toward healing?
Okay. You're not going to get healed without my interaction, because there's lefts and rights and things that happen. Everyone has biochemical individuality. My protocol is the same for everybody, but stretched like when you go to the carnival and they make balloon animals. It's stretched to meet your needs, and your needs change. If you bail out on me, your growth is going to be stunted. And you'll be calling me a year later saying I'm back again. And so you need to stay in touch with me, and there's various ways to do it. I'll explain that in a minute. I forget the second part of the question. I always listen to myself so much, but let me extrapolate on that. Is that there is I'm only one person, and as you know, a lot of people get frustrated with me. I work like hell at it. They're returning emails at 4 a.m, and all that. So it's tough, and so it's frustrating for you to say, well, you tell me to stay in touch with you. I'm not that bad, but sometimes they slip through. So I developed a protocol where it combines everything I've ever said to anybody. I know every question you're going to ask me when you call me. It's like that show used to be called Name That Tune, and you try to name the tune in 1 or 2 or 3 notes. I know in 2 or 3 notes what you're going to tell me, and I already know the answers, and I know what can possibly go wrong. So I developed a knowledge base, it's called a protocol, where people can go to and get every answer to their question. If you say to me, well, I was doing okay, but I had diarrhea Sunday morning, but then in the afternoon it seemed to be constipation, and then I started bleeding. I have the answer for that already. What did I do? I took 5 years of transcribing everything I ever said to anybody about this subject, and I put it into this product, where I call it a product because it's something that can substitute for an appointment with me, and you can access it anytime you want. And I think it's better than me, because I might have a bad day, I might forget something. It's all on there, and we've gone over it. So one thing you might want to do is consider that, and I sell it, but it's $195, $1 cheaper, $100 cheaper than having an appointment with me. I'm trying to find a way to heal the world, and I can only do one at a time, and it frustrates the hell out of me. So it's a pretty good thing to do, and again, it's a way to get healed and stay in touch with me by accessing that. And you can still access me if you get stuck. You say, I don't understand what that word means or whatever. That you can send me a text, and so you still have me there. I'm always going to be there. So I think I answered at least part of your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very understandable. You know, you work really hard. You have so many patients, and so staying in touch is extremely important.
I want to just jump in there and tell you the average medical doctor carries about 75, 80, and real busy ones maybe 120 patients. I have 750 at least, and I add 100 new every month, and I shouldn't do that at all. I'm at a breaking point. It's like, okay, I can't handle any more than this, and I take on 100 more every month. I don't know. It's like I can't do it. That's why I developed this other thing. And so when you're up until 4 in the morning and you're not putting a dent in it, that tells you something. So.
Well, yeah, and it definitely makes sense. I mean, we're going to have to invite the audience to connect here when do you plan on connecting on YouTube Live, you know, so they can come?
Every Friday at 4 o'clock. I want to make another comment. It's kind of humorous, but it's happened twice. I'm treating a guy, I think he was in Scotland. I'm talking to him about his son. He starts to ask me questions. He says, Dr. Snow, how's your blood pressure? I said, oh, that's good. Okay. I just started, I don't know what he's getting at. Then a little while he goes, what about your cholesterol? I go, geez, my cholesterol's perfect. Yeah. So I guess, you have any prostate problems? He's interjecting this, and I go, prostate? Now you're getting a little personal. You're not going to check my prostate, God's sake. And he says, no. I said, what are you up to? He says, I just want to make sure you're not going to die before you finish treating my son. He was worried. He was serious. He said, because I know you're old, you're 69. I go, well, all those things are good. I think I'm going to, take me another month for your son. That came up 2 different times. And other times the guy was in England. And so I think it's kind of funny. I don't take it personal, but they were trying to hide what they were getting at, but it was getting kind of obvious. So.
Well, definitely. I mean, it makes sense that, if you're doing well, there's something important about the gut, right? I mean, the gut, they call it the second brain, right?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
there's a whole thing there with the gut-brain strategy, maybe. I don't use it much because it's getting away from the subject. Anything that brings you away from the core issue of building mucosal lining, and I wish if there was 9 other things, I'd be promoting the heck out of them. But when you start getting into a little bit of an esoteric thing about that is true that there's a connection, and it is valid, but as far as fixing something, it doesn't have that much value. It's just nice to understand it. And it might be able to explain some psychological, emotional issues that you have a problem with your gut and it's affecting your brain. But as far as fixing IBS, it has nothing to do with it. It just isn't relevant. Like I tell people with food, you're not going to heal your gut with food. It's not about nutrition. And I tell people, let's go eat some Twinkies as a way of sort of assaulting the mothers out there who say, no way, you can't. And I say, I'm trying to make it a point. And I say assaulting, I say just sort of shocking them that they got their child. No sugar, no this, no that. And I'll say, you're limiting your child and you might even be stunting their growth because it's not about that. It's about texture. And so I had a girl, she was about 12. I said, now at the end I said, I explained to you because she wanted, the only thing she said to me is, can I have chocolate? And the mother went, no, don't ask that. And I said to her, part of your prescription here is to go out and get a bunch of Kit Kat bars, at least 2, and eat them right away. And the mother was horrified. But I said, you know what? If you look at the label of Kit Kat bars, there's like 1 gram of fiber in there. The only more superior food on the planet is Twinkies. And that's an inside joke with all my patients, but it's a valid thing. I'm in the grocery line one day, and they have all that junky stuff just before you get to put your food on the thing there. And there's all that, candy and gum and those Twinkies. So I had a minute there, waiting. And I said, Twinkies, I haven't had those in years. I used to love those. And so I looked at the label. I'm reading, I said, wow, look at all that junk. No fiber. You don't realize how an old man in a line, getting his groceries, starts jumping around going, this is fantastic. I went on my Facebook page and I told people, eat Twinkies. I said, I'm developing a new food pyramid. Used to be like grains and eggs and all that. And all the blocks on the food pyramid, the Twinkies. And the only point I'm making is that they don't have fiber, which I extrapolate is that temporarily while we're getting healed, we don't eat fiber because it's rough. It's the only dietary restriction because it's rough. Until we get our mucosal lining set up, you swallow a nice healthy salad. All the mothers go out and get the raw carrots and everything. You swallow that stuff, it's like swallowing a Brillo pad. So what we do is we limit that and Twinkies, because sugar, is one thing. But if we're trying to fix the gut, it's irrelevant. And, what's wrong with having a Twinkie once in a while? I used to stick my tongue in there and try to scoop out as much of the white stuff as possible. And I'm going to tell all the kids out there, don't let your mom take away your Twinkies because there's no fiber. And then one last part of that, we had a little contest. We said everybody should have, if you have inflammatory bowel condition, should you eat 2 organic apples or 2 Twinkies? And of course, everyone says the apples. Said, let's do this. Eat the apples and tell me what it was like on the toilet the next morning. And then eat the Twinkies and tell me what it was like. And it was 100% they had diarrhea or something like that in the morning with the apples, and everything was smooth with the Twinkies. So, and I'm not getting a cut from the Twinkie companies or anything like that. Okay?
That's really interesting. And perhaps that's related to a question that someone has here, Tammy. And by the way, let us know if we can continue taking more questions, because there's a few more. But yeah. She says, how is it possible that someone with more inflammation heals quicker than someone that doesn't have much?
Tammy, you designed a tough question to answer. How's it possible? Well, it's possible where the inflammation is. I don't know what you're talking about. Inflammation, it's got to do with a test, like a prolactin test or a SED rate. So if it's one of those things, if it's due to a test, that's different because that's measuring not only inflammation in the bowel but the whole body. It's also only measuring what was going on at that time. Any kind of diagnostic test tells you what's going on at that second. Now, inflammation, someone has higher inflammation than you. How do we measure that? How do we quantify that? By pain. And we also have biochemical individuality, how fast people heal, what their age is, the quality of the supplements. So there's some variables, and it equates into one of those questions I don't have a definitive answer for. My orientation to it is to bring somebody back and say, all right, it's not working. Let's do either what the other guy did, but more likely let's shuffle the deck of the supplements I have for you. So that's my answer, and I don't think it's complete. And what I need maybe is a few minutes to think about it. I'll either relate that today or next week. Because that part of the equation is kind of complicated. There's so many variables.
Perfect. Madman says, someone that has a lot of scar tissue causing blockages.
Yeah.
What can be done?
Yeah. That's time consuming over time. There's supplements that have proteolytic enzymes in them that will eat away at anything that's not supposed to be there, whether it be a tumor or a scar or some kind of bump. It takes time. So 2 things that we talk about there, narrowing. One is, there's several things. One can be narrowing because of swelling. We put the mucosal line down there and the swelling will go down, okay, because we're covering it. That's the most simplistic part of the narrowing. Other people have scar tissue, genuine scar tissue, but there's a little layer between. We go one step further back, take a step back, there's calluses, like calluses on your hand. If you work hard, maybe a pair of shoes that was rubbing your heel, calluses. All that is extra skin to protect an area that's being rubbed or inflamed or hit by acid. And that's pre-scar tissue, meaning that calluses, here's an example. If you were working with your hands, digging with a shovel, and you don't have any calluses, and you're digging and digging, probably within an hour you're going to get some blisters. But if you do it every day, you're going to get some calluses. And somebody might say, well, put on a pair of gloves. You can avoid all that. A pair of gloves, of course, is going to stop the handle from rubbing the skin. Well, a glove in this case, put on a glove on your colon, is putting in the mucosal lining. That's putting a glove in there. Putting something like sunscreen. Putting something between you and the sun, you and the acid. Okay, if you have genuine scar tissue strictures, that's harder. You have to take the what do they call the prolytic yes, enzymes that are, there's a product called Wobenzyme. Amazing product. Amazing. And that contains these proteolytic enzymes. And what they do is they chip away at the scar tissue. It takes a long time. I mean, you can really take a lot of it and make a little bit of risk that the enzymes in there are going to inflame other parts of your bowel. But it's amazing. It's sold primarily as a arthritic product. And I did what my thing is to extrapolate that and say, well, what would break down these lumps and bumps and tumors? Wobenzyme, and there's several other ones out there. I forget the names of them. But that's what it takes, and I don't know of anything else. You have to cover the tissue, don't allow it to have any more access to the tissue, and then chip away at it, and I don't know of anything else that will break it down. And we've seen people do it over a longer period of time, but you got to be persistent with it, and the stuff's not cheap. So that's my answer about that.
Yeah, Wobenzyme is definitely incredible. I took it myself, and I remember getting really good results at the colonoscopy. Here another question from another user. What does sugar make me? Why does sugar make me ache?
Yeah, we see that. I oftentimes say it has nothing to do with GI problems. It does in that sense. It's unnatural when it's refined. The body doesn't recognize it as well. It says, "Well, who the heck are you?" And it goes back to that releasing those extra acids to break it down. It wants to break down the sugar in several ways, but it's an empty product. When you take sugar, and it's chronically, we did this on a radio show for years ago. It was really fascinating. Sugar cane has all the minerals. It's got 72 minerals. Imagine that. Most people don't know, and there's actually 81. I had the wrong numbers. 81 they know of. Sugar cane has it all. But when they take sugar cane and break it down, they take away everything but the molecule that makes it sweet. And what happens is that the other minerals in there are supposed to help you digest the sugar, the sweetness part, and be able to appreciate it. So now you don't have the stuff that's going to take care of the sugar, and it borrows that mineral, steals it from your teeth. That's how we get decay. It says, you know what, we need A, B, C, D, and all these minerals. Where are we going to get them? Oh, from the teeth, from the skeleton. So one of the things that's done in the long run, if you're kind of a sugaraholic and been that way for a long time, is stealing the minerals from other parts of your body, and that can cause aches and pains, and also requires extra acid because it seems to be a foreign product, and it will cause the pain that way. So the best answer is to replace the mucosal lining and get it through all those circles I call cells. Okay?
Perfect.
Or you eat sugarcane, whole sugarcane, you're going to get all those minerals, and that'll stop. Sucanat. I'm going back to my health food store days. Sucanat, you probably know about that. That's whole sugarcane.
Yeah, sugarcane is really, really nice. So someone says here, isn't fiber what causes stools to be the normal form shape, and no fiber would make stools mushy? Or what causes stools to be fully formed and normal?
Okay, good question. Yes, that's a little bit of a way we have to sacrifice we have to make, or compromise, or a temporary way to make a decision. When we say low fiber, we're talking about fiber from food. When we swallow it and chew it, actually swallow it, it's not broken down as well as we think it is. It's broken down, but it's still going down like a Brillo pad. So we say, you know what, we can't have that tissue irritated by that Brillo pad type, I call it. So we say no fiber. Why is that? Well, just temporarily to give the tissue a break while building the mucosal lining. People usually already have diarrhea, so it's not like it's going to cause diarrhea. We get that mucosal lining covered up the tissue, and we come back with a fiber. But oftentimes I choose to use a fiber powder because those have been milled in a way. It takes off the sharp edges, and what we're looking for is bulk, and the bulk will help pull together the water and the other parts of the waste. So yes, we need the fiber to form a stool, but we sacrifice that part temporarily because we don't want to aggravate the tissue. One other thing I think of that there's a supplement called butyric acid. That occurs when the probiotic. This is the magic of life. The probiotics just blow my mind. Is that they need to eat fiber too. That's one of their foods, and they'll swallow. We swallow fiber, and it sits there. It takes a long time for food to pass through your system unless you're sick, and it eats some of the fiber, and as an exit, excretes something called butyric acid. And then what is butyric acid? It's another way that builds the mucosal lining. You got the probiotic and colostrum, but if you eat plenty of fiber, it's going to do that butyric acid thing. And so when we are able to eat fiber, it builds and completes the mucosal lining, and we always want to have it, but get it from our food then. But temporarily, sometimes we have to restrict it and then use it fiber powder. We always bring them back to not using the fiber. I don't want any of my patients to ever use fiber ongoing, but we use it as we need it. And how do we know when we need it and don't need it? If you're forming a beautiful stool, we say, let's take the fiber away and see how you do without it. And if we still need some, we go back with less fiber and work our way out of it. But fiber is important. We shouldn't depend on a fiber supplement after we're healed.
Perfect. We've got yet one more question, doctor, from one of our users. Is it true that lower back pain is linked to gut issues? If my gut gets better, will my back pain decrease?
I don't know of a direct connection. The answer I would give is that possibly. And if I didn't think it was possible, I'd say that. But remember what I've said several times is every part of the body. Here's another analogy. The bowel muscle, the intestinal muscle, every nerve in the body passes through there. And sometimes if your elbow's hurting, it's because there's a hole being eaten where there's a nerve that's connected to the elbow. And when you cover that up and patch it up, the nerve is no longer being inflamed, and the elbow pain goes away. So that could be true about a back. It's not a general thing you can say or a specific thing you can say that, the back problems are caused by GI problems. Not in a direct way we'd think, like fix that GI problem. It's more of the inside thoughts, like I just said, is that if there's a nerve there that's connected to the back, which is a little bit of a long shot, but it happens. But I would not count on getting rid of your back problem by fixing a gut problem.
Incredible, doctor. I've learned more in 1 hour than I've learned in 18 years. So how can people continue to learn from you? Where can they find you?
Well, my website is www.gicure.com, or if they're interested in looking at those protocols that I don't even have a name for them, I'm just calling the protocols that have all my knowledge in there, they can go to the website www.holisticgastroenterology.com, and otherwise email holisticgi@yahoo.com is my most reliable one at this moment. I switch them every 2 minutes, I guess. And 800-244-1815 is my telephone number. And I want to say this. I'm telling people, don't email me. Call me at that 508-244-1815. I just can't answer any emails, and I would love to talk to you on the phone versus sending an impersonal email. So don't be afraid to call me, okay?
Excellent, doctor. Thank you so much. Do we have time for one last question?
Sure. I'm running out of saliva, but I have enough for one more question.
All right. Someone says, people who take metamucil every day shouldn't be?
Okay. Let's see. The answer on that one is, we also go by, just have a rule, I'll make it up now, is that whatever works. If it's working for you, some people need fiber. And maybe older, a lot of women, I don't know why it's more so women than men, get constipated and they need that help. Here's a thing about fiber you need to know. If you're constipated and you say, I'm going to take some fiber, don't do it that way. Because if you're already blocked up, the fiber is going to come in and smack into that like a traffic jam. because fiber doesn't cause the itself technically doesn't cause the elimination of the waste. What it does, it stimulates the muscle to move in a peristaltic motion, and that forces the waste out. So fiber is supposed to go through there and actually strengthens the bowel. But if someone needs it and they say, every time I stop it I get backed up, take it. One note about the otherwise, when you're just going to start fiber and say, I'm going to try something, I'm desperate, get some magnesium. Magnesium pills, what they do, they pull water into the stool, soften its stomach. Then when the fiber comes barreling down the roadway, it runs into that waste that's stuck there, it's already loosened up, pushes it out. I had a girl from the Dominican Republic that was coughing out fiber. She'd cough and it would come out of her mouth. I'd never seen that before. And so I said, you got to get some magnesium. She said, well, we don't have it in my country. I said, well, get some here. And there aren't a lot of, there are, but they're not reliable enough sources of magnesium in food to do that when you're really constipated. So the answer is, if it works for them, take it. If they seem to have irritable bowel or something, they need to build up mucosal lining. And so I would never say never. I say probably 5% of the people, which is a lot of people who have a problem with constipation, should take a metamucil every day. So.
That definitely makes sense. Thank you, doctor, so much for all of your answers. It's very relieving, I'm sure, to the audience and to ourselves. We're finding the light at the end of the tunnel. Again, to repeat the website, holisticgastroenterology.com for more information, gicure.com for scheduling an appointment with a doctor. And there is a great ebook that I love personally at the bottom of the page, which is great. It breaks down great myths and truths about information about our gut. So thank you so much, doctor, for answering all the questions. We'll definitely look forward to seeing you next Friday at 4 p.m.
Okay, thank you. And the shows will be recorded too. If someone wants to, someone can't be available at 4 o'clock, they'll be on YouTube as a recording.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to end this live stream, guys. Thank you so much, doctor.
Okay. Thank you.
See you next week.
Thank you.